Hey everybody, Al Quackenbush, the SoCal Bow Hunter. This is the next video in my series on my rifle rebuild overhaul project. Basically a labor of love. It is a Remington 700 VTR chambered in 308. If you saw the first two videos, you know that the barrel was very rusted, needed to be cleaned up, so I cleaned it up in the second video. But I wanted to do something different with this rifle. I wanted to replace some of the components. I wanted it to be something I could use for long range shooting, but also for hunting. Did lots of research and played around and figured out what I wanted to do with it. So, without further ado, let's go into what I did not replace on the rifle. And it's only a couple things. The trigger. I left the trigger alone. Why? I've not had a problem with the Remington triggers. I think that they work just fine. And it's one thing that I did not have to spend extra money on to fix. I haven't used it yet. I can always fix it in the future. The bolt is just fine the way it is. Cleaned it up a little bit. I may end up putting a bolt knob on this later on. We'll see. Depends on how much clearance I have with the scope. The obvious thing that I've done is I decided to swap stocks. I went with the Magpul Hunter for Remington 700 rifles. This is for the short action rifles. I needed something that was going to be a little bit more ergonomic for me, and that's why I went with this one. It works out very well. It's very comfortable, but it also has great bedding, and it allows plenty of free float between the stock and the barrel. Big plus for me. One of the things that I did not care for on the original rifle was the hinge release. I'm not a big fan of hinge releases, so I swapped it out. And I went with the Magpul bolt action magazine well. For the mere fact that it fits this better, and I can use a 5-round magazine or a 10-round magazine depending on if I'm shooting long range or hunting. The 5-round works great for me because it doesn't stick out too far, and when I'm shooting I really don't need more than 5 rounds. So that's going to work out well. I chose a Nylon Rail from BCM. And it's M-LOK compatible that will mount to the stock so that I can use the Magpul 1913 for Picatinny rails. This is in flat dark earth, as is the stock. I wanted everything to match. So this will be a fun little accessory to add. I don't use a bipod that often, but when I do, having it match is just a personal preference. The biggest thing that I had to do work on and replace was the barrel. I didn't replace anything. Let me correct that. I stripped all of the rust off using some navel jelly and a little bit of elbow grease. It took me less than an hour. Instead of bluing it, I decided I wanted to Cerakote it. I wanted to do something different. That's why I chose this. So I took it to Gun Compensator in Torrance, California, where Scott Lynn and his team did a fantastic job on this. It matches perfectly to the stock and every other piece that I have in flat dark earth. They bead blasted it, cleaned up all the rest of the rust. There was a little bit inside the receiver, and it looks fantastic. So that's completed. I decided to stick with Warne scope rings. I've had very good luck with these for mounting the scope that I chose to put on here. Stick with the best. Now, as far as optics goes, I decided to go with a Vortex Strike Eagle 4-24 by 50. Now, this is one that a friend of mine and I have used in the past. We both like it. Plus, it'll work great for long range. It was fairly inexpensive, and it's just a cool scope to put on there. Could I have chosen a bunch of different scopes? Absolutely. But for what I'm using it for, it'll be great. It's got an illuminated reticle. It's a 4-power, of course, so it'll work out great. I am going to plan on sighting this in and zeroing it in at 200 yards and then reach out from there. And here is the rifle fully assembled. I opted to not create an assembly video because I figured you guys had probably already seen one. And the trigger on this was a bit challenging. It had been fully taken apart, so I had to put it all back together, and it took me a little while, as it was my first time putting this sort of a trigger together. But here it is, fully assembled. It looks pretty sweet. It functions, the bolt cycles very, very cleanly, so I'm pretty excited about taking this out to the range. That's going to be my next stop, is zeroing this in at 200 yards and seeing if all this work was worth it. We'll see. I'm pretty excited and I'm looking forward to it.